Thank you so much. I need to bring my panel in. My dear friend, Megan Murphy, the former editor of Bloomberg Business Week, is back with us. Nan Hayworth, a former Republican congresswoman from the great state of New York. Congresswoman, yes. To you first, what is your takeaway how this budget got done? Is it a positive sign that, they passed something?
Yeah, obviously it helps. I think it's interesting and informative that neither side wanted to pursue a shutdown. So obviously, the Democratic leadership did not think that holding everything up on DACA was a good idea this time around. And the Republicans, for their part, did not want to see a shutdown either. Rand Paul makes an excellent fiscal point. He is absolutely right. I agree with him. This is yet another instance of our pushing debt onto future generations in ways that could be very, very troubling indeed. But economic growth, which we are seeing now, we hope will make up for much of the projected deficits we see now.
Yes, wishing is always a
but we are getting much better growth. We're on pace to do much better this year than has been the case in the previous administration.
Well, we've had slow and steady growth. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that's true. We've had slow and steady growth through the Obama administration. President Trump did supercharge the market with policies, but we've actually seen a big drawback in the markets. Did you want to comment on that?
I guess the moral is deficits are really, really bad until they're not anymore. What is so interesting about this deal is that it couldn't be more establishment politics in terms of pushing through hundreds of billions of more spending. We just had a tax cut which is expected to add $1.5 trillion to the federal deficit. This is hundreds of billions more. This is military spending. This is domestic spending, which Democrats love. We've got infrastructure. We've got opioids. There's disaster relief spending in there. But this is a classic spend bill. It goes against the very core of what Republicans have been arguing about all during the entirety of the Obama administration, that deficits were bad, that this was going to leave an unbelievable burden on future generations at precisely the time when we had aging demographics. Well, if they're that bad, we didn't see it last night. And what's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out when you may not like what Rand Paul did in terms of theater, but he does make those points. And guess what? It cuts against the very fabric of what the Republican Party has been arguing about for 8 years.
I think we have a clip of it because to that exact point, you might not like his tactics, but his point makes a whole lot of sense. Let's watch.
The bottom line is you have to give people less money. If you give people more money, they'll continue to waste it at the same rate. You can say we're rooting out waste, but if you're always increasing the amount of money you give people, there'll be more waste.
Okay, and not only have Republicans traditionally been against more spending, I want to share what the president said a year ago on this.
No more wasted money. We're going to be spending the money in a very, very careful manner. Our moral duty to the taxpayer requires us to make our government leaner and more accountable. We must do a lot more with less.
Listen, I'm not saying President Trump has an easy job. He has a very hard job. But he said right there that it is our moral duty to do more with less.
Sure.
We're doing exactly the opposite. How can he cheerlead for this bill now?
Well, he has been paring down departments of government, and it is a monumental task, Stephanie. There's no question about it. And it's a task that it's going to take many, many years to accomplish. Here is the fundamental fact is that we don't have a governing majority.
You think a military parade's going to help pare that down? That's not free.
The way I've heard it presented would be that whatever parade might be done would be done strictly with voluntary contributions. But so it wouldn't add to.
Who would volunteer bringing tanks to Washington? Would President Trump pay that for his foundation?
I don't know, and I think that's a distraction. The point being that we don't have a governing majority in the Senate. If we had 60 votes for fiscally conservative policies in the Senate, then we could pass radically different or significantly different bills, but we don't. So we have to accommodate the Democratic majority in the Senate. And that's something that Mitch McConnell has chosen to do. He could get rid of the filibuster on passing legislation and pass legislation with a simple majority, 51 votes, which I think he should do, but he has not. I understand why no senator wants to relinquish that prerogative, so to speak. So we are stuck with higher spending than we should have, and primarily it is driven, although not solely, but primarily primarily this deficit spending is driven by deferring to the Democrats.
Can I just jump in there real quick? Because the biggest component of additional spending in this bill is spending on the military. And
Sure, that's a pot
Republican
sweetener. Yes,
priority
Megan.
number one.
Pot sweetener for Republicans, I get it, but
Pot sweetener to the tune
Not a
of
pot
$300
sweetener. I mean,
million.
$300 million
It is
bucks.
a lot.
That ain't a pot sweetener.
I'm not supporting all this massive
But
spending.
you can't
and I think
possibly say they're deferring to Democrats when it's a $300
they
million
absolutely are
spend
deferring to Democrats
for Republicans.
because the size of the deficit spending in that bill would definitely be lower if they passed a bill with, I'd like them not to have to pass it with just Republican votes, but if they did, the deficit spending component would be much different.
Well, let's give the president actually his fair due on this. This isn't the budget he would have wanted.
No.
He has pushed very hard for much tighter on spending on terms of entitlement programs and looking for deep, radical, almost transformation of our social compact we have with Americans. That is parked now because, frankly, his own leadership and his own party basically said, we're not even going to touch that, and we're not going to touch that for some time to come. What is going to be so interesting going forward on this is now that you have this type of budget in place, it does heap on that much more pressure to look at Social Security, to look at Medicare, to look at things that are the cornerstone of Paul Ryan and some other Republicans in the Senate, but that also are political dynamite
very
in some
difficult
cases
issues.
as we head into 2018 and 2020. They may have created with this kind of bill something that is going to come back and bite them again in the future. And I'm one eye on the futures there, as you are, I'm sure, Steph, to see how the market reacts to this, given the turmoil we've seen this last week.
Quite a lot.
But it has been quite a ride, and it expects to continue to.
All right, we have to leave this conversation there because we have a lot more to cover.